Castle of Good Hope looks different at night. By day, it's a museum, a tourist stop, a relic of colonial South Africa. But after dark, when the gates close and the city quiets, it becomes something else. The stone walls seem to breathe, the shadows lengthen, and the air grows heavy with things you don't want to name. I learned that the night I walked the ramparts alone, the sea mist rolled in from Table Bay, clinging to the fortress like a second skin. The fog crawled over the cannons, swirled between the bastions, and seeped into every crack in the stone. My boots struck hollow against the walkway, each step echoing faintly, as if the walls were whispering the sound back to me. That's when I saw him. A figure, tall, unnaturally tall, standing still at the far end of the rampart. He wore a broad-brimmed hat pulled low, his outline sharp against the haze. For a moment I thought it was a guard, or maybe one of the costumed guides who lingered too late. But then, I noticed something wrong. The mist curled around me, clinging damp against my clothes and skin. But around him, it broke. It parted cleanly, as though repelled by an invisible barrier. The fog gave him distance, refusing to touch him, leaving him perfectly dry, perfectly still, perfectly wrong. I froze. My chest tightened, every instinct screaming that I should turn back. But my legs carried me forward as if they no longer belonged to me. With each step I took, he seemed to grow taller, or maybe the walls around us shrank. His hat tilted just slightly, a gesture so small, yet so deliberate, as though he had been waiting for me. When I was close enough to see the outline of his coat, he moved, one step forward. The mist recoiled again, sliding back across the stones. He walked toward me with strides that should have echoed like mine, but his boots made no sound at all. His silence pressed against me harder than any shout could. He stopped just a few paces away. Even in the dim light, I couldn't see his face. There was only darkness under the brim of his hat, a void that felt deeper than shadow. My skin prickled as if that darkness were staring back at me, pulling something from me I didn't want to give. Then he raised one arm, slowly, impossibly smoothly, his hand extended out toward me. Long fingers stretched into the mist, and it fled. Where his hand passed, the fog shredded and scattered, refusing to settle near him. He pointed. At first, I thought he was pointing at me. My heart hammered so hard it shook my ribs. But then I followed the gesture. He was pointing down into the courtyard. Through the fog below, shapes began to form. Men in faded uniforms, rifles slung across their shoulders. The mist swirled around them, but never touched them either. One lifted his head, and his face was pale, hollow-eyed, lips pulled back as though mid-scream, but no sound came. The others followed, one by one, empty mouths opening in silent agony. When I looked back up, the tall man was gone, but his presence remained. The air pressed heavier, colder, until my breath fogged in front of me even as the mist around the castle began to thin. My vision blurred at the edges, and for a heartbeat, I thought I felt something behind me, towering, leaning close, its unseen face hovering just above my shoulder. I ran. I bolted across the ramparts, down the narrow stairwells, through the echoing arches, not stopping until I stumbled into the courtyard where the shapes had stood. It was empty now. No soldiers, no fog, just silence and stone. But I could still feel it, the air bending, shifting, making room for something that didn't belong here. And in the distance, from somewhere high above, I heard it, a single hollow footstep, silent boots against ancient stone. The tall man in the hat was still walking. I wasn't supposed to be in the castle that late. I had signed up for one of the evening tours, the kind where they herd you in groups through the courtyards and corridors, while a guide whispers stories about dungeons and executions. The sun had already set when we started, the walls glowing orange with floodlights, and the mist from Table Bay drifted low across the ground. But tours move fast, and I lingered too long. When the group turned a corner, I stopped beneath the bell tower, craning my neck to stare up at the rusted iron bell hanging high above. The guide had said the rope was cut centuries ago, after the garrison grew sick of hearing it toll on its own at night. The story was chilling, sure, but in the crowd it was easy to laugh it off. And then, suddenly, I was alone. The voices of the tour group had faded into the corridors, swallowed by stone. The courtyard was silent. I glanced around, expecting to see at least one straggler, but there was no one, just the empty fortress, the mist curling along the cobblestones, and the tower looming over me. I meant to hurry after them, but the air changed. It thickened, as though the night itself was holding its breath. The mist slowed, hanging unnaturally still. My own breathing sounded too loud. And then it came, a hollow toll. The bell rang. The sound rolled across the courtyard, so heavy it made the stones tremble beneath my feet. My heart lurched. The bell swayed against the dark sky, creaking violently in its frame. But the rope wasn't there. There was no one to ring it. And yet, I heard movement above, footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the platform under the bell. The boards groaned under the weight of someone I couldn't see. My scalp prickled as the sound grew louder, closer, until I swore I could feel it vibrating through my chest. I should have run, but my legs locked in place. I could only watch the tower, transfixed, as the invisible footsteps stopped, and then the bell tolled again. This time louder, deeper, the kind of sound that shook your bones. My vision blurred at the edges. The night seemed to ripple with each swing of the bell, the air bending as though something was forcing its way through. I backed toward the archway, desperate to escape. But then I saw him, a man, a soldier maybe. His uniform was faded, his figure half-formed in shadow. He stood beside the bell, gripping a rope that wasn't there, yanking it down in violent bursts. The frayed strands at the bottom of the bell swayed uselessly, but in his hands, the phantom rope pulled taut. Each tug set the bell swinging. Each swing tore another hollow toll into the night. And then he stopped. Slowly, as though realizing I was watching, he lifted his head. His face was pale, blurred around the edges, but his eyes glowed faintly, a washed-out white that burned into mine. He opened his mouth. No sound came out, but I understood him. Remember us. The air shifted, and I wasn't alone anymore. Figures lined the tower, crowding the corners, standing shoulder to shoulder. Soldiers in tattered uniforms, faces gaunt. Their boots struck the floor in unison, a phantom march that thundered without sound. The bell rocked wildly above them, vibrating so violently I thought the whole tower might collapse. I stumbled back into the courtyard, heart racing, the tolling rattling in my chest like a second heartbeat. And then, just as suddenly, silence. The bell froze, perfectly still against the sky. The figures vanished. The footsteps stopped. When I looked again, the courtyard was empty. The mist drifted lazily, as though nothing had happened. The tour group found me a few minutes later, pale and shaking. The guide asked if I'd gotten lost. I wanted to tell him what I saw, but when I opened my mouth, no words came. Even now, weeks later, I still hear it sometimes. That hollow toll, that soldier's eyes, the bell that hasn't been touched in centuries. I booked a heritage stay at the Castle of Good Hope, something few tourists get to do. I found a rare program that let guests stay overnight in one of the small quarters once used by officers. I thought it would be romantic, atmospheric, a chance to sleep inside South Africa's oldest colonial fortress. Instead, it nearly broke me. The room was plain, whitewashed walls, a small bed, a desk with a flickering lamp. The air smelled faintly of sea salt, and something sour underneath, like damp wool. The windows were narrow, barred, and the mist from Table Bay pressed against the glass in sluggish waves. By 11 p.m., the castle had gone silent. The tours ended, the floodlights dimmed, and the heavy wooden gates closed with a groan that reverberated through the courtyard. I sat at the desk, writing in my travel journal by lamplight, when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Someone rapped softly on my door. I froze, pen in hand. The staff had told me I was the only overnight guest. No one should have been wandering the halls this late. But the knocks came again, gentle, deliberate, spaced evenly like a heartbeat. My throat went dry. "Hello?" I managed. No answer, just silence, heavy and expectant. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. No one stood there. The corridor was empty, lit only by a pale wash of moonlight. The air felt colder outside the room, thick enough to sting my skin. I leaned out, scanning left and right. Nothing moved, no sound. And then I saw her. At the far end of the corridor, half dissolved into shadow, stood a woman. She wore a long gray dress, its fabric dull and frayed, blending into the stone behind her. I blinked, and she was closer, not walking, not gliding, just closer, as though the space between us had folded in an instant. My body seized up. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. The lamp in my room flickered violently, shadows tearing across the walls. I stumbled backward inside and slammed the door shut. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The wood shuddered as though something pressed against it from the other side. Then, silent. Minutes dragged by. I sat on the bed, shaking, staring at the door, waiting for another knock. It never came. Eventually, exhaustion dulled the panic. I lay down fully dressed, keeping the lamp on, and tried to convince myself it had been fatigue, a trick of the shadows. But at 3:12 a.m., I woke to the sound of breathing. Not mine. Shallow, ragged, right beside the bed. I turned my head, every muscle screaming not to. She was sitting there. The woman in gray, perched on the chair by the desk, her dress spilling to the floor like pooled smoke. Her face was pale, eyes sunken, lips parted just enough to show a darkness where teeth should have been. Her head tilted slowly, bird-like, as though studying me. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Her hand rose, impossibly slow, reaching toward me. The moment her fingertips brushed my blanket, the lamp shattered. The room collapsed into darkness. I must have blacked out. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the narrow window. The chair was empty. The lamp lay broken on the floor. My journal was open on the desk, on a page I hadn't written. 3 words were scrawled there. "Let me in." I left the castle that morning without finishing the program. I didn't check out. I didn't explain. I just walked through the gates into the sunlight, my bag still half packed. But even now, some nights, I wake to a knock at my door, soft, patient, waiting. And I know if I ever open it again, she'll be standing there. Every haunting has a witness. You've just become one. Subscribe and never be alone again.